So to begin, we're going to talk about watercolor paper. If you've ever had an experience with watercolor, you know that the paper is the most important thing when you're watercolor painting. The watercolor paper is made a little bit different than regular paper. As you can see, it's a little thicker. It also has quite a texture on the surface, depending on if you get cold press or hot press. And it's made with a lot of cotton fibers that are interwoven into the paper, and that's for the absorbency. You can actually put a surprising amount of water on your paper and not have it be dripping down the surface and not have it be soaking into the paper and making your paper all flimsy and kind of crumbling apart like it does with regular notebook paper. So there's two kinds of watercolor paper. There's 90 pound, which you can see how transparent the 90 pound is. It's a lot thinner. It's more easily bendable. And then there's like 130, 140 pound paper. And that one is definitely thicker. And I personally like the 130, 140 pound. I just like it better. I think it stands up a little bit better over time. And I just like how thick it is, especially if you're painting in plein air. You want to make sure that your paper is nice and thick because the thinner paper tends to blow around and is more susceptible to buckling due to humidity and that kind of thing. So I always recommend for my students, especially with beginner, that we start with a nice thick paper, the 130, 140 pound. And like I said, we're using cold press. Now the difference between the cold press and the hot press, as you can see on the surface of the paper, the cold press is going to have more of a texture to it, which is great for dry brushing and scraping, for adding textures into your painting. And the hot press is going to have more of a smooth surface, more of a vellum surface, which is great if you are more of a hyper realist and you like to get those nice transitions in your gradients and your washes. That's going to be useful for you, so you may choose to do the hot press. As far as brands, I'm not paid to endorse any sort of brand, but for beginner, I do like this Artist Loft brand. You can find it at Michael's or Joann's, and it's just a nice all-round paper. It has a really nice tooth to it, or the texture of the paper. You can see that it's got a nice texture if you wanted to do dry brushing on there. And this is the 140 pound 11 by 15. Don't go real small. This Artist Loft, they do make them their watercolor pads pretty small. When you're in the beginning, you can buy the bigger paper, and you can always cut it down for whenever you want to do exercises and practice and that sort of thing. But I like this Artist Loft paper because it does hold up pretty well. It resists a lot of buckling. It's already pre-stretched, which is great. The next one is the Fabrino. It's an Italian brand paper. I have found it at Artist and Craftsman Supply down towards School Hill. I've also found it at Blick Art Supply in Shady Side. They have it there too. This one I'm not as familiar with, but it is a nice paper. This was the 140 pound, again, cold press. I like it just because you get quite a lot of sheets, and the price point is pretty good. I think this pad here cost me about $25 to $30. So that's a pretty good price point for watercolor paper. And again, it does have a really nice tooth to it that's similar to the Artist Loft. This one is Stonehenge. Again, you can find this, I've only found this one at Artist and Craftsman Supply and Blick in Shady Side. This one is 140 pound cold press. And this one's nice because it comes in a block. So what does that mean? Well, it means that the edges are all kind of glued together, okay? And my first experience with this, I was like, well, how do I get my pages off? So if you look around the edge, you can see that it's like kind of shiny and they're all glued together. So you just go around the edge until you find an area, you can kind of see it there, that is not glued together. Do you see this little square here, this little rectangle that is not shiny? That is where you can insert a palette knife underneath the first sheet, and then you would slice all the way around and it would lift off. So why would I need this? Well, I need this for if I'm painting in plein air and I don't want my pages to be blowing around. So it kind of alleviates the use of little clips to hold down your paper. You don't need to do that, which is great when you're traveling in plein air because you don't want to have a lot of stuff with you. So the artist block is that's the purpose of that. Even if you're not painting in plein air and you're just painting in the studio, this is still a great option because it kind of holds your paper down so that when you're painting with a lot of water, you're not getting that like ripply, warped paper effect, which can affect your washes. And again, this has a really nice tooth to it. This is cold press again. Just an all-around nice paper. I really like it. The price point is similar to the Fabrino. You get, let's see, 15 sheets, and it's about $25, $27, somewhere around there. Now this is the Cadillac of all watercolor paper. This is Arches paper. It's only made in France. It's pronounced in French, Arches, or Arche. This is the 140-pound cold press and fine grain. It is a beautiful, beautiful paper. This is an example of some of the beautiful washes that I've done, which is in another video, but just such a velvety, nice touch. It has a lot of texture to it. So some artists find it difficult to work with, especially the hyperrealism artists. They don't really like that texture, but it is a very, very nice, very high cotton content to it. Now this is kind of expensive. So this is the 10 by 14 size, and you only get 12 sheets. And this is probably around $35. So I don't recommend this for beginners because it is very expensive. And like I said, the cold press texture can be a little hard to work with at first. I personally love this paper. I've made some really nice gradients and on it. I just really, really like it. So, and a lot of watercolorists use Arches paper for their paintings when they're doing their finals. Okay, and that about brings us to the end of the paper explanation. So, like I said, I'm not endorsed by any brand, so whatever you can afford when you're first starting out is perfectly fine.